Tonight, I want to come to escape to fantasy. Most or many of the clients that I work with would not see this as one of their characteristics initially. But once they begin to understand it, many go, wow, I didn't even realize I did that. And this is a really significant issue for me to look at. And that's really what I want to do today, is just help you better understand what we mean when we talk about escaping to fantasy, why people from complex trauma do it, and what healthy looks like. So let me begin with the definition. It's said to be a self-protective coping mechanism used by many abuse victims. It's a way of mentally or emotionally leaving the situation or spacing out to enter a fantasy world. And this often helps to anesthetize the person by relieving their present pain. So it's a way of escaping out of pain and feeling better. That's what it is. But it's also something that becomes addictive and obsessive. And so when a person becomes addicted to this escape through fantasy, it often is very hard for them to let go, much more difficult than they expected it to be. So another way just to say that is a person is escaping something painful. And that could be their circumstances, but it could also be themselves. And we're going to develop that. Or it could be painful emotions that they're wanting to escape. And so it's trying to make all these negative feelings go away and replace them with positive. And so fantasy becomes their way of doing that. Let me give you a couple examples just so you understand what I'm talking about and how broad this whole topic is. So we live in a day of internet dating. And for many people, they meet somebody online, and without really getting to know the person at all, they begin to develop a fantasy of this person where they're madly in love with them, this person's madly in love with them, and it becomes this relationship that there's nothing in reality that is actually happening, but in the fantasy world, it is developing into this wonderful relationship with a wonderful person. That happens. Some people, as younger people or even adults, still escape to fantasy about becoming somebody great, a movie star, the most popular person in the class, the one that everybody wants to date. And the fantasy world is where they escape to feeling important and feeling loved. Some people, when they go through sexual abuse, they're escape out of their body-like experience so that they're not even conscious of it happening to them. It sometimes feels like it's happening to somebody else. Some people escape into fantasy within the world of religion. And they go into the world of religion thinking that it will magically fix their marriage, their addiction, their children. And so the religion and the magic of the religion is a fantasy fix. So they don't have to work at anything. It will just fix it for them. I had a client 10 years ago, and I taught about escaping to fantasy, and at first he didn't even think that was an issue for him. But then over the next days, as he thought about it, he realized that the minute he stepped out of his apartment to go for a walk downtown or go pick something up, he checked out of the present and escaped into this world of fantasy the entire time he was walking. And it was always this wonderful world where everything went well. And when he saw that, he was actually quite shocked and scared by how big of a thing it was in his life. Or let's say you meet Mr. Right. And Mr. Right is your knight in shining armor. They're just so kind and wonderful to you. And you just fall head over heels in love, even though everybody around you who knows the Mr. Right is saying he's Mr. Wrong. And you conclude they're all wrong, you're the only one that's got it right. Mr. Right is perfect. Or you can have a boy growing up in a home where he's not loved, where he doesn't feel like he belongs. And so he is attracted to gang life. There it looks like everybody loves each other and respects each other. There he's made to feel like he fits in and belongs, and this is his family. And he creates this fantasy of the wonderful family he will have in gang life. Or it can even go into more subtle stuff, like a mother or a father who is not present to their children because they're on their phone, on social media, looking up stuff on the internet, shopping, escaping into their fantasy world. Relying on fantasy, daydreaming as escapism, I suffer from avoidant personality disorder, as well as depression, low self-esteem. And over the past couple of years, a way that I have dealt with it is to use fantasy. I started off with occasionally imagining myself as a different person and daydreaming about being in positive situations. But over the years, the fantasies have become more detailed, with the person I imagine having a totally different name, life, etc. It's gotten to the point where I imagine these fantasies every single day and have trouble sleeping if I'm not imagining myself as this other person. I'm fully aware that it's all fantasy, but the degree that I've come to rely on it scares me, and I've never heard of anyone else with this kind of problem. I'm afraid to talk to a therapist about it because I'm afraid of what he or she would think of me. Signed, Dreamer. So hopefully those examples help you understand what I'm talking about by this escape to fantasy. And hopefully, if you do that yourself, you've been able to identify some of the times that you do escape into this fantasy world. I need to say up front that there are healthy escapes into fantasy. They're not all unhealthy. So let me just give you examples of healthy escapes into fantasy. All of us, young, old, we still go into our imaginations. And we imagine a different world. We imagine how things could be better. That can be a very healthy activity. Children love to use their imaginations. They love to make forts, have tea parties, dress up, and imagine that there's somebody else. They love to write stories of imagination. And that can be a very helpful thing for them in developing their brains, in developing their minds and their outlook on life. If you look at our culture today, we escape into watching sports. And some would even imagine when they played that sport. We escape into movies and we go on Netflix marathons. We escape into novels, books that take us to some other place. And that can be a very healthy thing as part of self-care. We also make plans for our future. We have dreams about what we would one day like to do, where we would one day like to live. And that can be a healthy thing. Sometimes when we're struggling with very frustrating, difficult circumstances, when life is hard, when we're struggling with depression, we can escape by going back to what life was once like. And we can say, you know what, this too will pass. We will one day have things better again. And it's a way of counteracting the negative thinking, the depression that wants to take us into a more morbid point of view by saying, no, this is what we can get to again. So there is a healthy type of escape.